the spring when I was 6 years old, my 3-year-old sister was dying of heart disease. When kindergarten ended for the year, I went off with my grandmother to some cousin's house. I thought it was an exciting vacation in honor of the end of the school year, but I later realized it was just to get me out of the way, because my sister had come home from the hospital for the last time, and my parents wanted relatively uninterrupted time with her. It was the early 80s. We did not have a video camera of our own, so my parents rented one and used it to film my sister playing around. It was, because it was the early 80s, a big, bulky, square thing that actually held a full VHS tape. So you could hook it up to the TV and it became a VCR, which we also didn't have yet at the time. So since they had that opportunity, they also went out and rented a movie. The movie they rented was Star Wars. And so it was in the Monday morning of that week. They were watching Star Wars when my sister died. They called my aunt and uncle's house, and my grandmother and I and my aunt and uncle and all my cousins came home. And there I was, a 6-year-old kid, surrounded by mourning, helpless grown-ups, which is not a very comfortable situation to be in. And on top of that, I was really itchy. And I thought I had a cold, and I was getting feverish. It turned out I had chicken pox. And for the rest of the week, after one evening at the viewing with everyone else, I stayed home while everyone else was at the funeral home or the funeral itself. I stayed home by myself and a couple older relatives who took turns watching me. I also have to stick in that our newborn baby sister also had chicken pox, because if she sees this and I don't mention that, she'll be offended that I left her out. So I was there by myself, feeling crappy, lying on the couch, using our rented video camera to watch the rented movie. For as big of a geek as I am, I was a really girly girl. I knew of Star Wars because, you know, all the boys in my class liked it. The kid who used to live in our house had accidentally left behind a small Chewbacca and I think it was a Rebel fighter, which I had, and I had no idea who they were for that entire first year that we lived in that house. I did not like science fiction. I didn't like robots. I didn't care about space. Actually, space kind of freaked me out. But, you know, I was sick and I had nothing better to do. And I watched it and I enjoyed it. I was fuzzy from the fever. And so a lot of it kind of came in my head and went straight out again, except for one scene.
Vader was all, "I have you now," and Obi-Wan was, "If you strike me down, I will become more powerful than you could ever imagine." And so it happened. He just raised his sword, prayerfully. Vader struck him down. It was over, and Luke screamed, "No!" But then there was a voice beyond the grave, and it was Obi-Wan saying, "Run, Luke," because he was still there in spirit.
I became convinced that that had been the scene that my sister was watching when she died. It was years before I figured out why I was convinced of this. Because it was the perfect scene. Because Obi-Wan wasn't afraid of death. He accepted it. He knew it was the right thing. He was the stronger one in that situation. Vader thought he had control, but it was really Obi-Wan. And there was life beyond death. Obi-Wan was still there talking to Luke, even though his body wasn't. You could see how this could have some meaning for a kid who was dealing with her first major death in her life. And for years, that was the scene. The only scene that I remembered clearly, until I saw all the movies again as a teenager, and eventually the prequels as an adult. And then I couldn't help loving Obi-Wan Kenobi even more because Ewan McGregor, you know. It's well documented that George Lucas was inspired by the work with mythology of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. when he developed Star Wars. This is proof then of the truth in that, the importance of mythology, the importance of story in human development, in human understanding. The right story at the right time can mean worlds to a person. Help them get through and understand the chaos that apparently life on Earth is. Now, the grown-ups had their own stories for dealing with death. They had their pretty little pictures that said God needed an angel. That story didn't help me. That story just made me feel inadequate because I hadn't been chosen to be an angel. But the Star Wars came at just the right moment for me, and Obi-Wan Kenobi really was my only hope. And so not only have I always loved Star Wars since then, but I've truly believed in story and in the power of story. A lot of people use the word myth as to mean a falsehood. That's a myth. That's an urban myth. I don't like that. It is more true in the depths of the human soul than facts are at times. So yeah, the Force will be with you always.